I can still feel the weight of that moment, as if it's frozen in my chest. The morning had started like any other special day. I woke up early, took a long shower, and put on the suit I'd been saving for this occasion. It was navy blue, freshly pressed, with a silver tie Sophie once told me made me look important. I stood in front of the mirror, straightened the tie, and smiled. Today, my daughter was getting married. I left my house with the wedding gift in my hand, a small, carefully wrapped box containing something very personal for Sophie. I had spent weeks picking it out, imagining the joy on her face when she opened it. The venue was buzzing when I arrived. The air smelled faintly of roses and fresh linen. Guests milled around in beautiful clothes, laughter and music blending together. I stepped out of my car and adjusted my jacket, my heart beating faster with every step toward the entrance. That's when I saw her. Sophie, my little girl. She was standing just outside the hall, wearing the most beautiful white dress I'd ever seen. For a moment I forgot she was 24. She looked like the same little girl who used to run into my arms after school telling me about her day. My eyes stung with pride. I walked toward her, my smile wide. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly, not wanting to disturb her. She turned, and that's when I noticed the look on her face. Not excitement, not joy, something else, something heavy. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling. I stepped closer, holding out the gift. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," I told her. Her hands didn't reach for the box. Instead, she looked at the ground, took a deep breath and said, "Dad, I'm sorry, but you can't be here. Please, go." I thought I'd misheard her. My heart skipped, then dropped. "What?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were shiny, but she didn't meet mine. "Please, it's better this way." 1,000 questions filled my head. Why? What happened? But she didn't explain. She just stood there, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if bracing for a storm. I looked at her for a long moment. The weight of the gift in my hand felt like a stone. My throat burned, but I swallowed hard. Without another word, I nodded slowly. I turned around, walked back to my car and opened the door. The laughter and music behind me faded with each step. When I sat inside, I placed the gift gently on the passenger seat. I rested my hands on the steering wheel, staring ahead at nothing. My heart was pounding, my jaw clenched. I didn't cry. Not yet. I started the engine, but I didn't drive away immediately. I watched through the windshield as people continued to arrive, smiling, hugging, unaware of the scene that had just unfolded. Somewhere inside that building, my daughter was about to walk down the aisle, without me. I put the car in gear and slowly pulled away from the venue, the sound of the celebration growing fainter behind me. I didn't look back, I didn't know it at that moment, but what happened next would change the entire day, for everyone. If you've been hooked by this story so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button and share it with someone who loves a good twist. The next chapter will reveal how everything reached this heartbreaking point. You won't want to miss it. It's strange how quickly happiness can turn into something else. Just a few months ago, things were different. I remember the day Sophie told me she was engaged. I was in my office finishing up some paperwork when my phone rang. Her voice was full of excitement. "Dad, Mark proposed," she shouted. I could hear the smile in her words, and it warmed me in a way nothing else could. "That's wonderful, Sophie. Tell me everything." She told me how it happened, at the park where they had their first date, the way Mark got down on one knee and how she cried before she could even say yes. I laughed with her, picturing it all. When she said they wanted to get married soon, I didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need, I'm here. I'll take care of the wedding costs so you can have the day you've always dreamed of." Her voice went soft. "Really, Dad?" "Of course," I said. "You only get married once. It should be perfect." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into making sure it would be perfect. I started calling venues, meeting with caterers, and helping her pick a photographer. I wasn't trying to take over. I just wanted her to know she could count on me. At first, it felt like we were a team. Sophie would call me after each meeting, telling me about flower arrangements or cake flavors. I'd listen, give my thoughts, and tell her I was proud of her. Those moments made me feel close to her again. But then Linda got involved. Linda and I divorced years ago. We had our differences, and they didn't go away just because the marriage ended. Still, I wanted to be civil for Sophie's sake. I knew she would want her mother involved, and I respected that. At first, Linda's input seemed harmless. She suggested a few dress shops, offered to handle the invitations, and said she could help with the seating arrangements. But slowly, I started noticing changes. One day, Sophie called me to say the venue had been booked. I hadn't been told about the meeting, even though I'd been the one researching venues for weeks. "Don't worry, Dad," she said when I asked. "Mom took care of it, it's perfect." I tried not to let it bother me. It was her wedding, after all, but it didn't stop there. Linda began scheduling planning meetings without me. When I offered to join, Sophie would say, "It's just a quick thing, Dad, I'll fill you in later." I brushed it off as busyness. Weddings are stressful. Maybe they were just trying to keep things moving. Still, I made sure to be present in every way I could. I met with the caterer and paid the deposit. I confirmed the band and covered their fee. I even arranged a block of hotel rooms for guests coming from out of town. Through it all, I told myself it didn't matter if my name wasn't on the invitations or if I wasn't in every meeting. What mattered was that Sophie had a beautiful day. But there was something in the way Linda looked at me during those rare times we crossed paths. It wasn't just indifference. It was as if she wanted me to know I wasn't welcome, that this wedding would happen with or without me. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the image of Sophie walking down the aisle, smiling, and knowing her dad had helped make it all possible. Back then, I still believed that was how it would be. It started with little things, the kind you almost convince yourself don't matter. One afternoon, I stopped by a stationery shop to look at invitation samples. I found a design I thought Sophie would love, soft cream paper with gold lettering and a subtle rose pattern along the edges. I bought a single sample and brought it to her apartment. When she opened the door, I handed it to her with a smile. "I thought this might work for the invitations. What do you think?" Her expression froze for a moment. "Oh, Dad, we already sent them out." I blinked. "You... what?" "Mom handled it last week. They're really nice, don't worry." I didn't know what to say. I had been ready to help her choose, to make it something special between us. Instead, it felt like I had missed an important moment, not because I forgot, but because I wasn't even told it was happening. I told myself not to take it personally. It was just invitations. But a few days later, I saw one of them for the first time. They were beautiful, sure, but my name wasn't on them. It didn't say, "together with their parents." It only mentioned Linda. I stared at the card for a long time before setting it down. Then came the meetings. I'd hear about them after they happened, a cake tasting here, a dress fitting there. Each time I'd ask Sophie about it, she'd smile a little too quickly and say, "It was just last minute, Dad, I'll tell you about it later." One evening I called her to ask about the seating plan. I had some ideas about where certain family members could sit to avoid old grudges causing tension. She paused before answering. "Oh, we already did the seating chart," she said. "You did it without me?" "It's not a big deal, Dad. You're still at a great table." Her voice was light, but I could hear something under it, a tone I couldn't quite name. The breaking point for me, at least in that stretch of time, came during a meeting with the florist. I had set it up and paid the deposit, so I expected to join Sophie for the final arrangement choices. When I arrived, the florist looked confused. "Oh, Sophie and her mother came in yesterday and finalized everything," she said. I smiled politely, but inside, I felt like someone had quietly closed a door in my face. When I saw Sophie later, I asked her about it. She brushed it off. "We didn't want to bother you with small details." Small details. That's what she called it. I tried to tell myself she was just busy, overwhelmed. But another part of me couldn't ignore the pattern, a slow but steady push to the sidelines. I kept paying for things. Every vendor I spoke to, every service I booked, I handled without complaint. But the joy of being part of my daughter's wedding planning was slipping away, replaced by an ache I didn't want to name. The worst part was, Sophie seemed different. She was still warm when we spoke, but there was a hesitation in her eyes, as if she was carrying something she didn't want to share. I didn't press her. I told myself it was better to stay out of the way and let her enjoy this time. Still, when I lay in bed at night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being deliberately left out, and I didn't know why. A week before the wedding, I stopped by the venue to drop off the final payment for the extra lighting Sophie had requested. The place was quiet, just a few staff moving chairs and arranging tables for another event. As I was walking back toward the parking lot, I heard familiar voices around the corner. It was Linda and Sophie. I was about to greet them when I caught Linda's words. "Trust me, Sophie," she said, her tone sharp but confident. "Having him there will ruin the atmosphere. People will talk. It's better if he doesn't come." I froze. My first thought was that I must have misheard. But then Sophie's voice came, soft and uncertain. "Mom? I don't know." Linda cut her off. "You do know. This is your day. The last thing you need is awkwardness and whispers. He'll understand." Understand? The only thing I understood was that my ex-wife was telling our daughter I shouldn't be at her wedding. The wedding I'd been paying for and looking forward to for months. I stood there, hidden by the corner of the building, my heart pounding in my ears. Part of me wanted to step out, to confront them both right there. But something in Sophie's voice stopped me. She wasn't agreeing. She wasn't refusing either. Instead, there was silence. Finally, Sophie said quietly, "I just don't want to fight." Linda's tone softened, almost in a rehearsed way. "Exactly. And the easiest way to avoid a fight is to keep him out of it. You can call him later, explain it gently. He'll still love you." I took a slow breath, my hands curling into fists at my sides. I had to force myself to walk away before they saw me. The drive home felt longer than it was. My mind kept replaying their conversation, each word sharper than the last. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself of two things. One, Linda's opinion of me hadn't changed since the divorce, and she would use any excuse to erase me from Sophie's big moments. Two, Sophie was caught in the middle, and I didn't know if she would stand up to her. The next few days passed in a blur. I went about my routines, answered work emails, and made sure all the vendors were paid in full. I didn't mention what I'd overheard to anyone, not even Uncle Tom, who probably would have told me to march right back and demand answers. Instead, I prepared for the wedding as if nothing had happened. I bought a new tie. I wrapped Sophie's gift with care. I told myself that no matter what was said behind my back, I would be there, smiling and proud, when my daughter walked down the aisle. But deep down there was a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my living room, the suit jacket hanging neatly by the door. I poured myself a glass of water, turned off my phone and stared at the small gift box on the coffee table. Whatever happened tomorrow, I told myself, I was ready. I didn't know then just how wrong I was. When Sophie told me to leave the wedding, it was like the air had been knocked out of me. I walked back to my car, each step feeling heavier than the last. My shoes crunched softly against the gravel, but all I could hear was her voice, quiet, almost trembling, asking me to go. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, my hands resting on the steering wheel. The gift I had brought for her sat untouched on the passenger seat, the silver wrapping catching the sunlight in soft glints. I didn't start the engine. I just stared out the windshield at nothing in particular. People passed by heading into the venue. Some glanced at me, most didn't. Laughter drifted through the air, mingling with faint music from inside. I imagined Sophie somewhere behind those walls, maybe adjusting her dress, maybe smiling for pictures. A part of me wanted to believe she'd come running out any moment, saying it was a mistake, telling me to stay. But minutes passed, then more. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. My mind went back over everything, the engagement call, the planning, the countless bills I had paid without question. Every choice I made had been for her. And yet, here I was, sitting outside, not even allowed in the building. I thought about what Linda had said a week earlier, the words I'd overheard about ruining the atmosphere. Maybe this had been her plan all along. But Sophie, she had gone along with it. The ache in my chest turned into something else, Not anger exactly, something quieter, something sharper. I took out my phone and opened my contacts. The caterer was first. I had paid for the food in full weeks ago, but the payment hadn't been processed to the final account yet. There was a window to reverse it. "Hi, this is Daniel," I said when they answered. "About the Roberts Hughes wedding. I need to cancel my payment authorization." There was a pause, then polite confusion, but they confirmed it could be done. Next was the band. I had booked them personally, covering their full fee and a bonus for extra sets. "Plans have changed," I told them. "Please refund the deposit to my account." Then the hotel where I'd arranged the block of rooms for out-of-town guests. Then the florist. Then the lighting company. Each call felt strange, a mix of finality and relief. I wasn't shouting, I wasn't trying to cause a scene. I was simply removing what I had provided. When I was done, I set the phone down and sat in silence. 2 hours had passed since I'd first arrived at the venue. Outside my window, the parking lot had mostly emptied. Everyone was inside now. I started the car and drove away, the road ahead stretching quietly into the distance. I didn't know what kind of chaos I had just set in motion inside that hall. All I knew was that I was finished being treated like I didn't matter. For the first time that day, the knot in my stomach began to loosen. I hadn't even made it home when my phone started buzzing. At first I ignored it. The sound was muffled in the pocket of my jacket, and I let it ring. But it kept going, over and over, one call after another. Eventually, I pulled over to the side of the road and checked the screen. 3 missed calls from Linda, 2 from an unknown number, probably the venue, 1 from Mark. I didn't answer any of them. I drove the rest of the way in silence. When I walked into my house, I placed Sophie's unopened gift on the kitchen counter. I took off my jacket, loosened my tie, and sat down in the living room without turning on the lights. The calls kept coming. Eventually, I answered one. It was Linda. "What did you do?" she snapped, skipping any greeting. "The caterer just walked out. The band says they're not playing. The florist isn't delivering the arrangements. You've ruined everything." I let her words hang in the air before answering. "I just called to cancel the payments I made," I said evenly. "If you wanted those things, you should have paid for them yourself." There was a sharp inhale on her end, followed by a string of angry words before she hung up. Minutes later, Mark called. His voice was strained, tight. "Daniel, please, we have guests here. Sophie's upset. Can't you just fix this?" "Fix what?" I asked. "You both let this happen. You both let me be told to leave." There was silence. Then he muttered something I couldn't make out and ended the call. I thought that might be the end of it. But then my phone rang again, and this time, it was Sophie. Her voice was shaking. "Dad, why would you do this?" I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. "Sophie, I've been there for you every step of the way. I've paid for almost everything. And when I showed up today, at your wedding, you told me to go." "I didn't want to," she whispered. "But you did," I said. "You stood there and let me walk away." There was a long pause. I could hear voices and movement in the background, chaos maybe, or people trying to make sense of what was happening. "We can't even start the ceremony," she said finally. "Nothing's ready. Everyone's confused." I didn't answer right away. When I spoke, my voice was calm. "Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be left out of something important. I didn't want it to be this way, Sophie, but you made a choice, and so did I." For a moment I thought she might say something else, but then the line went quiet, and the call ended. I sat there in my living room, the sunlight shifting across the floor as the day moved on. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel proud, but I felt done. Done with being treated like an afterthought. Done with being expected to give without being given respect in return. Somewhere across town the wedding guests were leaving, the decorations were probably being taken down, and the day Sophie had planned for months was falling apart. And I was sitting in my own home, finally at peace with my decision.